This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, good. Everyone in their best behavior. So this is where the tell the difference between the women and the girls, the men and the boys, right? This is where the issues come up when it comes to cooking on Shabbos, and this is the main issue on Shabbos. Okay, so let's go through first the generals, and then we'll get to more specifics. Okay, so page 191, the prohibition of kindling and extinguishing a fire, putting food on a source of heat. It is prohibited to light, extinguish, turn up, or turn down any fire on Shabbos. When can we turn up or turn down a fire? On Yom Tov and on weekdays, right? But of course, right? On Yom Tov, there we are allowed to do this ochel nefesh, this food consumption. But when it comes to Shabbos, we cannot alter in any way, light, extinguish, turn up, turn down in any way. It is prohibited to cook, bake, roast, fry food on a fire or on any other source of heat. All types of using heat, right? Whereas it's fine to cool something off, as we discussed last time, the water cooler, right? So there, you take out hot water from the water cooler, that's a problem because then cold water goes into the hot water area and gets cooked. But you take out cold water, so regular room temperature water goes into the cold water compartment. As long as it's not automatically turning on the compressor, which it does not automatically turn it on, we're fine. There's no problem cooling off. The problem is bishul. Keep in mind, this is all related to the 39 malachot, the 39 creative activities that went in at the Mishkan. Heating, cooking was one of them. Cooling off was not one of them. Okay, so that is not going to be an issue. Of course.
So the refrigerators that have the water component, you can't use that on Shabbos, can you?
Okay, so the refrigerators that have the water component, so that works electronically. If your refrigerator has Shabbat mode, now many refrigerators have Shabbat mode, right? And you might think, right, is it worth it for them to put in a Shabbat mode? I mean, what is the market percentage of those who are buying their refrigerators that want a Shabbat mode? But the truth is that the refrigerator is the same refrigerator. It's just an engineering little twist that they have a mode that you could put it into that doesn't activate. So if a refrigerator has a Shabbat mode, then it's fine. Otherwise, it's problematic. The same way that a water cooler, when you buy a water cooler for the house, if you want to buy one, you have to make sure that it's simply a mechanical one. There are some that work electronically. You push a button and then electronically, that's what you want. One that has basically a lift or a push, whatever it is, but it's simply mechanical, right? Does it work when it's not plugged in? Right? That's your question, right? If it works when you're not plugged in, then well, you have to make sure there aren't any lights going on, right? Then for the most part, you're good to go. Okay, solid and liquid food, even if they were cooked prior to Shabbos, may not be reheated directly on an electric hot plate, steamer, etc. Okay, I'm going to disagree with this. I'm going to take a more lenient approach, and let's understand. Once food is cooked, we have a general rule, ein bishul achar bishul. Bishul is cooking. There's no cooking after cooking, meaning once it's been cooked, it's cooked. We only say that in regard to solid, not liquid. Okay? If I have a soup, a chicken soup, fully cooked and it goes into the refrigerator, that's it. Were I to reheat it, then that's bishul achar bishul. That's once again cooking, and that we can't do. If it's a solid, then once it's cooked, it's cooked. Even if I reheat it, I'm not cooking it now. I'm just warming it up. It's already cooked. I'm not cooking it on Shabbos when I reheat it. So then what is the problem that he's talking about over here? When he says it may not be reheated directly on an electric hot plate, steamer, etc. What he's concerned about, and this is a must repeating theme. There are always two things we need to check. Number one, is it bishul? Is it cooking? If it's cooking, full stop, right? Do not continue to step two. The answer is no. If it's not cooking, proceed to step two. What is step two? Does it look like I'm cooking? Does it appear like cooking? If it appears like cooking, then rabbinically we don't allow it because someone else will get confused. You might get confused between that and another similar case, and then we have a problem. So he says, may not be reheated directly on an electric hot plate, steamer, etc. Instead, what should you do? You should put it onto a blech. What is a blech?
It's like a sheet, a plate.
A sheet or a plate that goes over the fire, right? And that serves as a visible reminder that we're not cooking, right? And we're just heating up. And even then, we'll soon see you can't put it directly over the fire. You put it on the side. Okay.
So, Rabbi, can I just ask a question?
Yes.
So the burners are still on the stove, right? You keep them on, but like at a low heat throughout.
Correct. Correct. Okay. Now, how about an electric hot plate? He says no. I say yes. And it's my class. No. Why is that? Right? Because we don't cook. The reason for those who are lenient on electric hot plate, which is what we follow here in the shul, is that you don't cook on an electric hot plate. What do you do on an electric hot plate? You warm up or hold the temperature. Therefore, it does not appear like cooking. So if it's fully cooked and it's a solid, so what I'm doing now will not be considered cooking. I could pass step one. I go to step two. Does it look like cooking? No, it doesn't look like cooking. Why does it not look like cooking? Because we don't cook on a hot plate. We warm things up on a hot plate. Okay? Yeah.
So I've always been wondering this too, how you say, I guess the authority says, or one opinion says no, but then when it comes to a community, you go and the community may have a different custom. I guess what determines it to be okay to go with a custom?
Okay, so keep in mind, if I'm writing a book, then I really have to put out usually the strictest view. Okay, because I don't want to be branded a whatever, I have to watch my back.
Gotcha.
Okay, but the teaching that I have from my teachers is that a hot plate, for the reason, and the reason resonates with me, we don't cook on hot plates. We warm up on hot plates, so it doesn't appear to be cooking. So let me ask you a question. Let's say I've got my oven is on Shabbos mode, okay, or Yom Tov mode, okay? So that means that when I open the door, the fire doesn't flare up right away. The light doesn't go on. Can I take my kugel or my rice out of the refrigerator and put it into my oven to warm up? No, correct. Why no? Good. We pass step one, we don't get to step two. It's not cooking because it's a solid, and once it's fully cooked, it doesn't cook, but it looks like cooking. Can I take it and put it onto my blech right above my fire? No. not right above the fire, because that can really cook. That can really cook. And many people, right now we eat lunch here, so we don't make cholent. When we're making cholent, and before we used the crock pot, we used to put a pot onto the fire, before Shabbos, of course, onto the blech, and it would cook the entire night. It would cook and cook and cook. But I could put it on the side of the blech, on the perimeter of the blech, because there it doesn't cook. It doesn't look like cooking. Or what I can do is, if I have an existing pot on the fire, I could put it on top of that pot.
That's what I do with my hot plate when I have certain temperatures of things that I
Good.
don't want it to get.
Good. So you're doing that, you don't want it to get too hot, which is fine. But I'm talking about on a halachic level, Danielle, right? Because let's say I want to warm up something, all right, and I have a cholent pot sitting on the fire. I could put it on top of that. That's called kli, a vessel, al gav, on top of a kli. And why is that okay? Because it doesn't look like cooking. That's not how people cook. That's not a normal way of cooking. You know what else I can do? Let's say I don't have something on the blech already. I could take a 9x13 pan, turn it upside down. I can create my own kli, al gabi kli, my own vessel on top of a vessel, and put it on top over there. Okay. One may not put food on the fire on Shabbos, even for a short period of time, even if there's no chance of the food becoming cooked in that period of time, right? That's an interesting question, right? So let me put it on the blech. Let me put it somewhere, and I'll take it off. I just need to, right? You need some milk for the baby. You need to take the chill out of the milk, right? So let me put it there for a little while and then take it away. No, I can't put it in a place where it could become cooked, right? Okay. So let's look at the pictures over here for a moment. Warming up on a radiator, that's a problem, right? Why is that a problem, according to me? Because it looks like there's a soup in there. Okay, that's going to be a big problem, right? Warming up, cooking on a gas flame, warming up on the hot plate, or the guys outside there have a little fire going, not too Shabbos over there going on over there, okay? So all of that is problematic, right? But, okay, but we explained. Actually, we'll have a section of this. 194 is going to deal with that. Kli al gabi kli, that'll be page 194. I just looked ahead. Okay, 192 is inedible. So basically what we do for Friday night, give me a second here. Okay, good. Good, okay, we'll come to all this. Okay, 192, inedible materials. It's also prohibited to melt solids like wax or metal or dry wood by means of heat or a fire. Okay, that's again not really something that would come up in our world so often, right? We're not smelting on Shabbos. Okay, perhaps the only thing might be the melting the wax, so the candle sticks in there. If you have, let's say, a Saturday night Yom Tov, but anyhow, you can't prepare on Shabbos until Shabbos ends. Yeah, okay. Mixing or adding foods to a pot on the fire. Page 193. We cannot add foods, liquids, or spices to a pot on the fire or other heat source. Okay? Similarly, one may not stir the food in the pot while it is on the fire. Why is that? What would stirring of the food do?
Cooking it.
Yes,
So
it expedites the cooking.
so if it's on a hot plate, if I have rice, I can't stir it.
Why could you stir the rice?
So
It's solid and it's cooked already. Now, I'm sorry, maybe I spoke too fast. If you put the rice on the fire, right, meaning with water and it's cooking, right? And it's cooking, and you put it on before Shabbos, and now it's cooking, and it's not yet fully cooked, that is a problem, right?
But already cooked is.
Correct.
stirring.
Correct. And even if it's not yet fully, let's say, well, no, right? Stirring will be a problem no matter how you can do it, right? Even off the fire. Let's say you have a cholent on the fire for a Shabbos day, and all my kids used to love to raid the cholent on Friday night. Okay? Now, when you raid the cholent on Friday night, right? So you're sticking your spoon in there to get out some of the good stuff. That ends up stirring. So what would the way be to take some of that cholent? Good. Take it off the fire, take some out, and then can I put it back on the fire?
It's in your hand.
Okay, good. So we'll come to that. When it comes to returning something to the fire on Shabbos, we'll have a whole section on that. I'm sorry, three and A and B. Okay, number one, it must be fully cooked. Because if it's not fully cooked, then you're putting on the fire is doing what? Cooking. So that's bona fide problem. Number two, it must still be hot, right? It must still be hot. Okay. Number 3 and 4, ideally both, but either one will do. Either I had in mind to put it back on, even if I wasn't holding it, or I was still holding it. Holding does not necessarily need to be like this. Holding could be like this. For those who are online, right? It's on the counter, but it's in my hand. I don't have to hold it. That's also considered to be holding it. Ideally, both of those, but also one of those will be sufficient. So as long as the boys took the cholent off with intent to put it back on, ideally with their hands still on it, it's fully cooked and it's still hot, then it can go back onto the fire. But we'll see all those cases soon. Okay, but one may not stir the food in the pot while it is on the fire. Okay.
So that says stirring, but like if you're serving from there, can you, like while the pot is on the blast, can you scoop into soup bowls and serve that? Or is that considered by scooping while it's on the fire?
So typically we would take it off the fire. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know if you could hear the question that came up, right? So Gabriella asked, so how about soup? You're serving soup Friday night, right? Can that be on the blech, right? It wouldn't be on the fire, right? It would be on the blech, on the covering, on the metal covering over the fire, right? So typically, ideally, we take it off and then dish out the soup, not while it's on the fire. Can I put it back on the fire again to use for the next day? As long as my requirements are met, as long as it's still hot, fully cooked, still hot, I either had in mind or my hand is on it, it can go back on. Okay. Here we have what we mentioned before, kli al gabi kli, page 194, placing one pot above another one. Although it is prohibited to put food directly on the fire, one may put a solid food without any soup or gravy that was fully cooked before Shabbos on top of a pot which had been standing on the stove since the onset of Shabbos. Okay? So it's got to be a solid food. Otherwise, by a liquid, we say there's cooking after cooking. Even though it's fully cooked, you're cooking it again. Okay? But if it's solid without any soup or gravy, right? We discussed this before. Let's say you have chicken Friday night and a nice gravy, and you serve that, then you want to serve the chicken again the next day, right? So the problem is, if you're just going to put it into the refrigerator, then all that gravy is going to harden, and then when you put it on top of another kli, it's going to turn back into a liquid. That's cooking again. But what can you do? What's the way to navigate that?
Get rid of some of the.
Yeah, take a dry pan and lift out the chicken and put it into that dry pan, and then that can be warmed up the next day. But there's gonna be a little bit of gravy that's going to be stuck to the chicken, right? That's not a problem. Like I say, you don't need to wet back the chicken, right, to make sure there's nothing in it, right? And there's some oils that will seep out of the chicken when you warm it up. That's part of the chicken. That's not a problem. So you can put it on top of a pot which have been standing on the stove since the onset of Shabbos. Again, I'll disagree about that. And if it wasn't there since the onset of Shabbos, and if I took a 9x13 and I turned it over, I put it on top, either way, it doesn't look like I'm cooking. That's not a normal way of cooking. So A, it's solid and it's cooked, so I'm not cooking. B, by putting on top of another pot, it doesn't look like I am cooking. But any food that contains a liquid, this is Gemara learning now, any food that contains a liquid, such as soup or gravy, may be put on top of a pot on the stove only if it will not reach a temperature of yad soledes, hot enough to cause the hand to recoil, even after being left there for a long period. Okay, that's good. That's important. A liquid is considered cooked or recooked once it reaches yad soledes bo, which is about 105, 110 degrees. That is yad soledes bo. Even though you might say, wait, I take a shower a lot hotter than 105 degrees, right? But yad soledes is not when I'm getting ready to get into a nice bath or shower. It's when suddenly, suddenly the water hits my hand. If it's that hot, what will happen? You will recoil. That's the yad soledes bo. Less than yad soledes bo is not considered to be cooking. So if there's gravy in my soup or gravy, and I'm going to put it, right, on top of another pot, and not that I'll take it off before it reaches yad soledes bo. That's not good enough, because we're always afraid you might forget. You might get distracted. There might be a couple of kids running around, and it gets a little distracting at times, right? The hearts don't know about that, but I can tell you it happens, believe it or not, right? So it's not that I'll remember before and I'll take it off. No, that's not good enough. But let's say it's just not that hot on top there. So it's going to take the chill out of it, right? You know, like that wouldn't be a chicken soup. You want it to be really hot. But let's say you have a lentil soup, some sort of a vegetable soup, where it doesn't need to be boiling hot. You want it to be lukewarm is fine. No, but thanks. But thank you. But a very gracious offer there. Thank you. Right? So I just want to take the chill out of it. Then it's okay. As long as it can't reach yad soledes bo, I'm good to go. Why am I good to go? It doesn't look like cooking, and guess what? It's also not cooking. If it doesn't reach yad soledes bo, it's not considered to be cooking. So any food that contains a liquid such as soup or gravy may be put on top of a pot on the stove, only if it will not reach a temperature yad soledes bo, even after being left there for a long period of time.
Rabbi,
Yes.
just a question on that. So, do you use a thermometer to check the temperature, or is it always like the finger test?
Yeah.
Or you could do like.
Yeah. Okay. Now we're going to go into Kli Rishon, Kli Sheni, Kli Shlishi. Okay, Kli means vessel. Rishon, first. Sheni, second. Shlishi, third. Okay, the vessel that's on the fire, that is the Rishon. Or your hot water urn that's keeping your water hot, that is your Kli Rishon. You pour it into a second, right? The soup pot is a kli rishon. You then put from that into a soup tureen, kli sheni. You dish from that soup tureen into the soup bowls, kli shlishi. Does the ladle? Maybe we could argue and say, well, soup pot, kli rishon, ladle, kli sheni, soup bowl, kli shlishi. Do we say that? So actually, there is a contradictory statement in the Mishnah Berurah himself about that. And the way we view it is as follows. If the ladle is sitting there in the pot, then it will not serve as its own, right? And once you've been doing it, it's not going to serve. But the first one could, whereas we're taking a cold ladle. What's the whole idea? The kli rishon that's cooking on the fire. The walls of that kli, of that vessel, are hot. That's going to maintain the heat. You pour it into a kli sheni. The vessel itself is cold. So what's going to happen now? It's going to cool down. Some of the heat's going to be transferred, right? Pretty soon, the plate's going to feel hot to the touch. Why is it hot to the touch? Because heat left the food and warmed that up. So we already have this tempering of the temperature between the original temperature and that of the plate. It's going to be tempered, right? And how much surface space, etc., etc. Now I go to a kli shlishi. It's going to cool down further. Okay, so let's start with a first vessel and pouring from a first vessel. A first vessel, 195, kli rishon, is a pot whose contents were heated up on the stove. It is prohibited to cook in a first vessel, putting food, liquids, or spices into it. A pot is still considered a first vessel, even if after it's removed from the stove, as long as it is still hot. Okay. However, dry food not containing soup or gravy that was fully cooked before Shabbos may be warmed up in a first vessel that was removed from the stove. For example, very practical example, you've got noodles. You don't cook your noodles in your soup. You need to cook your noodles separately, right? Now, I take my soup pot off the fire and I'm serving my chicken soup and I want to put some noodles into the bowl. I had my cold noodles coming out of the fridge. I cooked them before Shabbos. Now these cold noodles, I want to put them in, right? So I can even put them into the soup bowl, the soup pot, the kli rishon, as long as it is not on the fire. Dry food, like the noodles, not containing soup or gravy, fully cooked before Shabbos, may be warmed up in a first vessel that was removed from the stove. It is also prohibited to pour the contents of the first vessel onto food or liquids, as this may cook the food. Okay? Usually, whatever the status is of a certain vessel, called Yisroel. Yisroel is pouring. Pouring that first vessel will have the same effect, even though, of course, it's not as hot, but we give it the same din, the same status as if it's going into the pot. So let's look at our diagrams. A first vessel on the fire, you can't put in whatever they're putting in over there. Okay? A first vessel removed from the fire, you can't put in liquid. However, and pouring from but if it was off the fire, a first vessel removed from the fire, you can't do a liquid, but you can do a dry food in the middle diagram. But pouring from a first vessel onto something else, that's considered as if I'm taking that chicken and doing what? Putting it into that vessel. And that will be a problem.
Would that be considered bishul?
That would be considered like bishul. Yes, the Yisroel is considered to be like bishul. Okay, my friends, I need to stop here. I need to head to the airport. Okay, but we'll
Safe
pick up
travel,
here.
Rabbi.
Thank you. Next week, I won't be here next week. We'll pick up Bezrat Hashem in 2 weeks. Okay? Good seeing you. Rose, Zaira, Leticia, Elizabeth.
Good, everybody. Say goodbye.
Safe travels.
Night.
Bye, Rabbi.
Okay, everybody. Good night. Good night.